You are standing by a campfire. It is 50,000 BC. The sun has just dipped below the horizon. No Netflix, no smartphones, no existential dread about unread emails. There is only you, the flames, and thick, acrid smoke. This smoke billows and blows right into your face. And somewhere in this moment, one of your ancestors looked at the smoke and thought, what if I did this on purpose? This is the story of how humans discovered smoking. No, we're not talking about cigarettes or cigars or that guy outside the office you always end up talking to for way too long. We are talking about the very first time, the moment a human intentionally inhaled the smoke of a burning plant, and why this might be one of the oldest habits of our species. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Smoking doesn't start with tobacco. It doesn't start with colonial trade routes. It doesn't start with Native American ceremonies or even the dawn of agriculture. The desire to inhale smoke might be hardwired into us on such a deep level that it predates all of human civilization, and the evidence for this is genuinely insane. Let's start with fire, because before you can smoke anything, you need fire, and fire has been part of human history for a very, very long time. The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire dates back roughly 1 million years. It happened in Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Archaeologists found ash from burnt plants and charred bones there. This wasn't the result of a random wildfire. It was the result of a sustained, controlled fire. It was intentionally lit and maintained inside the cave. 1 million years ago, we weren't even Homo sapiens yet. It was Homo erectus, our earlier relative with a smaller brain and massive brow ridges. They sat around campfires exactly the way we do. They cooked food, they kept warm, they huddled together in the dark, and they breathed smoke. Every single day for hundreds of thousands of years, every human and pre-human sitting by a fire inhaled smoke. It was inevitable. It was constant. It was essentially the original air quality problem. And nobody had a smartphone app to check it, but here's where it gets really interesting. Some of that smoke wasn't just wood smoke. When you burn organic matter, you don't just get carbon dioxide. You get a whole cocktail of chemical compounds. It all depends on what exactly you're burning. Some plants release psychoactive substances when burned, alkaloids, terpenes, compounds that interact with the human nervous system. In other words, some of our ancestors were accidentally getting high, and they had no idea why they suddenly felt so good. And this isn't some fringe theory. Researchers have been suggesting one thing for decades. Early humans living in forested areas were regularly exposed to smoke. It was smoke from psychoactive plants like cannabis, or various entheogens that grew naturally across Eurasia and Africa. The human brain, as it turns out, has receptors that respond to cannabinoids. These receptors didn't evolve because of cannabis. They are part of our endocannabinoid system. This system regulates everything from mood to memory and appetite. But the very fact of their existence means one thing. When a human first inhaled smoke from burning cannabis, their brain wasn't confused. Their brain said, "Oh, hello, I've been waiting for you." And that moment could be the true origin of smoking. It wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't a plan. It was just a very pleasant accident. That repeated often enough for someone to want to recreate it intentionally. Think about that for a second. The entire multi-trillion-dollar global tobacco industry, centuries of rituals, shamanic traditions, medical practices, social customs, all of this might have started because a tired hunter sat on the wrong side of the campfire and had an unexpectedly great evening. History is sometimes beautiful in its absurdity. Now we need to be careful with the timeline. Ancient humans smoked different things, and ancient humans intentionally cultivated plants for smoking. These are two very different claims. Let's talk about what archaeology actually says. The oldest direct evidence of intentional cannabis use is burned cannabis seeds found in a context of deliberate inhalation. They come from a burial site in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, dating to around 500 BC. Archaeologists found wooden braziers there. Inside were superheated stones and plant residues with high THC content. This wasn't wild hemp used for ropes or food. This was the good stuff. and it was placed right in a ritual burial. But here's the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind. Does the absence of older evidence mean it didn't happen earlier, or does it just mean we haven't found it yet? Organic materials almost never survive in the ground for thousands of years. Seeds, leaves, plant fibers rot away. We find stone tools that are 3 million years old because stone is practically indestructible, but a wooden pipe stuffed with herbs will vanish in a couple of centuries. A leather pouch of cannabis will dissolve into the earth long before any archaeologist shows up. So the absence of evidence in this case is absolutely not evidence of absence. Then there's the Herodotus problem. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote in the 5th century BC. He described the Scythians in incredible detail. A nomadic people of the Eurasian steppes, they performed what he called a vapor bath. They would set up small enclosed tents, heat stones until they glowed, and throw hemp seeds onto those stones. Then they would sit inside the tent and inhale the smoke. And as Herodotus wrote, howl with pleasure. For centuries, historians thought he was exaggerating, or that he just misunderstood what he saw. But then archaeologists started excavating Scythian burial mounds, and guess what they found? Bronze braziers, heated stones, and hemp residue. Exactly what Herodotus described. This guy was just reporting what he saw. He wasn't embellishing. If anything, he was understating it. Let's talk about tobacco, because it's the plant most people associate with smoking. Tobacco is a plant in the genus Nicotiana, and its homeland is the Americas. This matters enormously because it means tobacco was completely unknown to the Old World. Not Europe, not Africa, not Asia, until contact with the Americas in the late 15th century. When European explorers arrived in the Caribbean in 1492, they immediately noticed the indigenous people doing something strange. Columbus himself wrote in his journal about people walking around with small glowing sticks, inhaling smoke from burning dried leaves, and letting it out through their noses and mouths. His crew was baffled, but his crew also tried it themselves within weeks, because of course they did, but tobacco use in the Americas is far older than 1492. Archaeological evidence of tobacco, specifically chemical residues in ancient pipes, have been found in the southeastern U.S. dating back 3,500 years. Some researchers believe it could have started significantly earlier, possibly 10,000 years ago or even more. And here's what's important to know about tobacco in ancient America. It wasn't recreational. At least, not primarily. It was sacred. Tobacco was used in healing rituals, in communicating with the spirit world, in sealing agreements between tribes. Blowing smoke on someone was an act of blessing, an act of connection and respect. A shaman who smoked wasn't taking a casual smoke break. He was opening a channel between the living and the divine. The smoke itself was considered a living carrier, a messenger that traveled between worlds, carrying prayers upward and bringing visions downward. This context matters. It explains why tobacco use was so disciplined, so ritualized and controlled in many cultures for thousands of years. When something is sacred, you treat it with reverence. You don't chain smoke pack after pack in front of the TV. The idea of tobacco as an everyday habit, something you do on your lunch break or while waiting for the bus, is an almost entirely European invention, and a fairly recent one at that. Now let's dig even deeper. There's a part of this story that few people have heard, and it might be the oldest evidence of intentional smoking in all of archaeology. In 2019, researchers made a remarkable discovery in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah. They found a hearth, a campfire site that is roughly 12,000 years old. Inside were seeds of Nicotiana attenuata, a wild species of tobacco native to North America. These seeds didn't just blow into the fire accidentally. They were concentrated there in a way that suggested deliberate placement. This site is thousands of years older than any known clay pipes in the region. This pushed back the possible timeline of tobacco use in the Americas significantly, and raised a genuinely fascinating question. If people were throwing tobacco into fires 12,000 years ago, what were people in other parts of the world doing with their local psychoactive plants? Because 12,000 years ago, humans were everywhere. In Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in Australia. And the human desire to alter consciousness is not an American phenomenon. It is a human phenomenon. Let me tell you something that might sound wild, but is seriously discussed by respected anthropologists. It's called the intoxication hypothesis. The basic argument goes like this. In virtually every documented human culture, people have sought ways to alter their consciousness. They drank fermented beverages, ate psychedelic mushrooms, inhaled smoke, chewed plant leaves, and swallowed seeds. This behavior is so universal and persistent that some researchers consider it not accidental. Ronald Siegel, a psychopharmacologist from UCLA, proposed an idea in the 1980s. The drive for intoxication is a fourth basic drive. It stands alongside hunger, thirst, and sex. And it is biologically hardwired into animal behavior. Elephants deliberately seek out fermented marula fruit. Reindeer in Siberia have been observed eating fly agaric mushrooms and then drinking the urine of other reindeer who ate the mushrooms because the psychoactive compounds passed through the body intact. Reindeer recycling drugs in Siberia. Honestly, you have to respect that. The point is, if the drive to alter consciousness is this deep, then it's entirely reasonable to assume one thing. Early humans, long before the domestication of any plants, long before the invention of pottery or pipes, deliberately exposed themselves to the smoke of psychoactive plants because they learned through experience that it changed their minds. Maybe they burned these plants during rituals. Maybe they chose campsites near specific plants. Through trial and error, prehistoric style, with very high stakes, sometimes literally fatal. But those who survived remembered it. They told others and passed it down through generations. This was knowledge that was never written down, but it was lived. Let's also talk about something that rarely comes up in this conversation. Smoking is medicine. Long before smoking became recreation, long before it became a spiritual practice, it might have been medicine. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest known medical documents in the world, dates back to ancient Egypt around 1550 BC. It describes treatments involving the inhalation of smoke from heated herbs, specifically for conditions affecting the throat and lungs. From a modern perspective, this sounds crazy. You're telling me the ancient Egyptians treated lung problems by inhaling smoke? Yes. That's exactly what they did. The herbs they used, including henbane and various aromatic resins, actually possess real pharmacological properties when inhaled. The ancient Greeks regularly used fumigation, therapeutic smoke. Hippocrates, whose name doctors swear by, wrote about inhaling herbal vapors to treat lung diseases. The logic wasn't crazy by the standards of the time. Smoke goes straight into the lungs. So if a plant has medicinal properties, delivering it via smoke makes a certain amount of sense. The lungs as a delivery mechanism. We still do this today with asthma inhalers and anesthetic gases. The delivery method survived, but the burning part, thankfully, mostly didn't. Ancient Indian Ayurvedic medicine, which is over 3,000 years old, describes a practice called dhumapana, literally smoke drinking. Inhaling medicinal herbs through pipes. The texts describe specific plants for specific conditions. This wasn't improvisation. It was a complex medical system with detailed protocols and centuries of refinement in ancient China, Mesopotamia, Greece, and India. In virtually every early civilization, there is evidence that people inhaled smoke for therapeutic purposes, not because they were addicted, not because it was considered cool, but because it worked, at least often enough that they kept doing it. There's another angle to this story, and it's related to social bonding. Humans are deeply social animals. Group cohesion was a matter of life and death. Isolated loners died. Groups survived. Anything that strengthened social bonds had real survival value. Shared rituals, including the consumption of psychoactive substances, are incredibly powerful tools for social cohesion. When a group of people experiences an altered state together, it creates a sense of connection and trust, which is very hard to replicate in any other way. Modern neuroscience has confirmed this. Shared rituals synchronized neural activity. They deepen group identity. So when ancient people sat together and inhaled smoke, it was social technology. It was an infrastructure of trust. The ritual smoke circle wasn't just a party. It allowed people to go into dangerous situations together and come back alive. And here we come to the uncomfortable part of the story, the transition from sacred smoke to a casual habit. Historically, this is an absolute disaster. When tobacco arrived in Europe in the 16th century, it spread at an alarming rate. Within a few decades, smoking went from an exotic curiosity to a continental obsession. By the 17th century, tobacco was traded worldwide. By the 18th century, snuff became fashionable among the aristocracy. By the 19th century, cigars were everywhere. And by the early 20th century, the industrial cigarette was invented. It made tobacco consumption cheaper, more convenient, and more addictive. What took Native Americans thousands of years to integrate into rituals, European industrialists turned into a mass market product in 4 centuries. The tobacco industry in the 20th century spent billions of dollars to hide the evidence that cigarettes cause cancer. They sold cigarettes to children. They hired doctors to advertise their products. They added chemicals to make the nicotine hit faster and harder, maximizing addiction. They turned something ancient and ritualistic into a product designed to be as destructive as possible. A shaman and a tobacco company executive worked with the same plant, but they had nothing else in common. The gap between a shaman in the 5th century BC and a corporate executive approving the sale of cigarettes to teenagers is one of the largest moral chasms in human history. Both dealt with smoke, but nothing else connected them. So when did ancient humans start smoking? The honest answer, we don't know for sure, and probably never will. Physical evidence confidently takes us back 12,000 years, and with reasonable assumptions, much further. The behavioral drive underlying smoking, the desire to alter consciousness and share a ritual experience, is almost certainly much older than any artifact we've found. It might be as old as fire itself. What we know for sure is one thing. This behavior is extraordinarily ancient. It predates agriculture. It predates pottery. It predates every civilization you learned about in school by the time written history began. In every corner of the world, people were already finding ways to inhale smoke. The specific plants changed. The rituals changed. The goals changed. But the behavior itself was already ancient when someone thought to write it down. There's something almost poetic about this. Despite all the technology and the internet, there are thin threads of continuity running through hundreds of thousands of years. Fire, smoke, breath. The most ancient humans sat by campfires and breathed the same smoke that you will smell today at a summer campfire. Some of them started paying attention to what that smoke was doing to them, and then they started choosing it and passing that choice down to their children. The next time you smell wood smoke on a cold night, remember that you are participating in something far more ancient than you realize, and you are doing what humans have always done. You are breathing.